All right, today we've got a Jeep Patriot. It's a 2000 and something. As you can see, the headlights here have seen a few miles, and the UV protective layer has failed, like about half of the cars on the road. So we're gonna do a really straightforward headlight restoration, and we're gonna do it in such a way that you can very easily reproduce these results with some very basic items yourself. And that's it. Let's get going. First, we are going to clean them up a little bit. We're going to wet sand them in a few stages. We're going to polish them, and then we are going to slap a couple of layers of a ceramic coating on the top, and we're going to call it good.
All right, and for this headlight restoration, unless I forgot something, and I probably did, we have gloves, of course. We have masking tape. We got a little compressed air. We have a couple of general purpose microfibers that I use for whatever. I have a polish buffing microfiber, and I have a finishing / leveling cloth that I no longer use on paint. I've also got a more aggressive polish. I've got a less aggressive polish. I have a little Optimum No-Rinse here, hella diluted. There's probably like a ½ ounce to a quart of water. I have sandpaper, 800 grit, 1200 grit, 2000 grit. The grits that you use are largely going to depend on what the condition of the headlights are. You kind of want the least aggressive that you can get away with for the job. Sometimes you can dip down to as low as like 400, but these just don't need it. Anybody who's not new to the ceramic coating game is going to be familiar with these little foam bricks. I am not using this for ceramic coating. What I actually use these for, and the only thing that I keep these around for, actually is as a sanding block. There is both the firm side, there's the squishy side. I don't ever use these for ceramic coatings, actually. I think they're terrible for that, but they are fantastic for wet sanding. So that's a little life hack for you for the day. I have my polisher. This is my Griot's G21 long throw, which is maybe a little bit much for these headlights, but it's powerful, so we'll use it. I've got a one-step pad here. I no longer use this one for paint either. This one I pretty much only use for headlights and chrome. This is an Adams one-step pad. It's a wool microfiber blend. And then I've got some leftover, this happens to be some really good ceramic coating, but I have some leftover ceramic coating from another project. And then down here, we have trusted advisor Jackson Polish, who we use for variable purposes.
You know, being a Jeep, it's got circular headlights, which can be a little goofy to mask off, but we've got some of this really nice flexible masking tape, and we are just going to roughly mask off the edges so that whenever we wet sand, we don't scuff the paint. You really don't have to spend a ton of time cleaning the lenses before you do this, because sandpaper is really just like a hella exfoliator, so it's going to do the cleaning for you. For wet sanding, I like to use my little blocks that I showed you wrapped around like this, and then I like to use a little O&R in my bottle of mostly water because it helps lubricate. On most headlights, you know, the whole game on wet sanding is you want to get all of your scratch marks evenly. So I like to go in a grid, up and down, diagonal, and sometimes a swirl in both directions. Since these are circular, I'm just going to kind of stick with the swirl. And on these, you'll notice I don't come all the way out to the edges. I normally would, but since these are kind of set in and the UV layer is still kind of intact there's no reason to continue to scrape it off. So I kind of, you know, went a little heavier on the front where it gets the most sun, and then just kind of feathered it out towards the edges, because there's really no reason to sand all the way to the edges on these. Okay, that was with the 800 grit. I'm moving to the 1200 now. My thing on kind of the progressive steps of wet sanding is I don't quite double I don't quite cut in half the coarseness by doubling the number. So instead of going 800 to 1600, I went 800 to 1200, just so there's a little bit more overlap so that there's not as much work in the polishing step. Now we're going to move up to the 1200. And if you've never really thought about it this way, polish is really just like liquid sandpaper, right? It's just quite a bit finer than most sandpapers. So, you know, the polishing is really just continuing the sand, but in a different method. So we're going to do the 2000, and then we're going to compound, and then we're going to polish. Compound varies a lot, but I would say if you're going to give it a range, compound is kind of like equivalent to, you know, 1200 grit to 3000 grit. So you're kind of still seeing that Venn diagram carry over like I was talking about. So since these edges are kind of recessed, and as I explained a little bit ago, I went ahead and feathered them, I'm actually going to start with my 3-inch for that specific reason, so that I can get those edges polished out, and then it'll make the rest of this restoration a little easier. It's already looking better. Now we're gonna hop on over to our 6-inch. This is Griot's fast correcting cream, by the way, which is in their Boss line. It's a diminishing polish, which means it gets smaller as you use it. So in some cases, this is a really, really great one-step polish, but it's kind of like my go-to compound. I love this stuff. Between passes with the polisher, I'm going to just spritz this down with a little O&R. I am going to hover over Jackson Polish, our trusted advisor. I'm going to spin dry and hit it with a little compressed air. You don't need a lot of this. I just like to disperse it a lot. You know, whatever your style choice is on dollops is the correct answer. We could probably call it done at this point, honestly. I'm gonna take it one step further. I'm gonna go back to the 3-inch, just so I can kind of end cap it with those edges. They still look pretty good. I can see some faint feathering right here that's really not a big deal, but I'm gonna go ahead and come in here. This time you really don't need to switch polishes if your finish looks like this, but I'm gonna go ahead and swap down to the next one in the Boss line. This is just a standard correcting cream. This is a really good go-to for whatever, and I just used way too much, that's okay. All right, I got the lenses about where I want them, and now I'm going to clean them up. This is Geon Prep. That's just what I happen to have within arm's reach. This is a alcohol-based panel prep, but honestly, you could just use like a little bit of water and alcohol, 50-50 mix would be fine. This is going to remove the polishing oils that we didn't buff off with our microfiber and get the surface ready to accept the coating. I'm actually going to go ahead. It's impossible to not make a little bit of mess on the front of the car, so you know, the neighborly thing to do would be to spend a little time whenever you're done with your headlight restoration to at least clean up that front bumper a little bit. So the accepted best practice on restoring the UV layer of restored headlights is 2K clear coat, which is a really, really good option, but it's a lot easier to get wrong and requires probably wet sanding and finishing again to make it look really good. Modern ceramic coatings are so good these days that we just honestly do that most of the time. Depends on the car, but for this it's going to be just fine. This is some Adams graphene coating. This is some of the good stuff that we use on paint. But we had some left over, so that's what we're gonna do. This is one of their micro suede applicators. I always wash these after I do a ceramic coating on a vehicle, and then I keep them around for non-paint things like trim, headlights, that sort of thing. And then once it goes on there, wait until it flashes kind of rainbowy, and then level it with your leveling cloth. All right, I got that rainbow shimmer going, so I'm just going to gently level this. We call this leveling instead of buffing because you're not really removing any excess coating. You're really just smoothing it out into one cohesive layer. And that's pretty much it. Here's the one we have not done yet. And then let's come on over to the one that we just finished for you guys. Huge difference, way safer, way nicer looking, improved resale value, improved appearance. Okay, so that's pretty much it. This is about as straightforward as a headlight restoration gets. As I mentioned before, we coated the results with some high quality ceramic coating. You know, the best practice is to use some 2K clear coat. It's got the little activator in the bottom of it. It's super hard. It's kind of like two-part epoxy. That is absolutely the best way to go, either that or cover it with PPF. But you know, for a really, really simple one like this, a ceramic coating, A, is accessible to just about anybody and really, really easy to use. It's not quite as intimidating as spraying clear coat. It doesn't involve another step and a waiting period. But it also replaces the UV layer, which is really the whole purpose of PPF or clear coat. Is a ceramic coating going to be an absolute lifetime permanent solution? Absolutely not. But in my experience, it lasts a really long time if you apply it correctly. And if you're doing your own car, I mean, it only takes a few minutes and a few drops of the stuff to cover them. So you could theoretically, you know, slap another coat on there every 6 to 12 months for forever, and your results are going to last. So before anybody calls me out about the 2K or the PPF versus a ceramic coating, I absolutely agree with you. I do give the option. It also just depends on the vehicle, depends on the situation. But in my experience, a layer of ceramic coating is honestly a pretty satisfactory solution as a final step. And I'm going to cover them in a little polymer sealant whenever I'm done with it too, as a little rain jacket so that it protects the coating while it cures. And that's about it.